We do appear to have a quorum, so I will call this meeting of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board to order. Monday, July 18th, 2022. Sharon, if you would please call the roll.
Good evening. Baltazar de Anda Santana. Barbara Harrington McKinney. Carolyn McAndrews.
Present.
Christopher McCahill.
Here.
Eric Paulson.
I'm here.
Grant Foster.
Present.
Keith Furman.
Present.
Randy Udall.
Here.
And Thomas Wilson.
Present. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Next item of business, approval of minutes from our June 6, 2022 meeting. Assuming all board members have had a chance to review those, is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Chris. Is there a second? Second by Randy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving our minutes from the June 6, 2022 meeting, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, the bill goes on as unanimous. Thank you. Do we have any registrants for public comment for items not on the agenda?
No.
Okay, thank you. Are there any communications, disclosures, or recusals from members of the board? All right, seeing none, before we get started, I believe Alder Paulson is a new member of the board. Hi, welcome, Alder. Would you like to say a few words?
I will be very brief. I am both new to this board and relatively new to the council. I serve on the Plan Commission, so I am the representative of the Plan Commission to this body.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, we've been hoping to have that position filled for quite some time, so we're very happy to have you. All right, our first item on the agenda then is Legistar 72006. Amending section 3.549B of the Madison General Ordinances to add the positions of Transit Chief Development Officer, Transit Chief Operating Officer, Transit Chief Maintenance Officer, and Transit Chief Administrative Officer to compensation group CG21 and adding or retitling the position elsewhere in the ordinances.
Hi, good evening, everybody. And I apologize in advance. I'm actually in the car in transit. This item, but happy to answer any questions you might have. So this is kind of a light reorganization of the management at Metro. Our deputy general manager, Crystal Martin, that many of you may know, is retiring. And so we are kind of reevaluating our organizational structure. And as part of that, creating out of both her position and several other positions that we haven't been able to successfully fill, kind of reorganizing to create these 4 chief roles. And so there's really one of these, there's 2 companion resolutions to this. One is before you today because it was added as an additional referral, but it goes closely with another one that's moving through in tandem with it. Basically, one of them is creating these positions in the budget. It's taking existing positions and reclassifying them, so we're not actually adding any positions. But the other thing that we're doing is creating these in a what's called our Comp Group 21 positions. These are positions that our management structure, basically they're contract positions, kind of like I am. And we're doing this in coordination with HR to basically allow us to create the positions at a salary range that we feel will be competitive to bring in people with experience doing this sort of work from external position, from other transit agencies. And so that's really the crux of what is before you today. I outlined this all in a memo. Hopefully you're all able to take a look at that, but it outlines some of the competitiveness that with regards to salaries that's happening in other cities. And kind of additional justification for these positions to be created at the level that they're at. So with that, I won't take any more of your time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to recommend amending? Alder Furman, go ahead.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? I think, Randy, you got there first. Any discussion? Alder Furman, go ahead.
I'll just be very brief. I really appreciate the work that Justin has put into this. The memo speaks for itself, and obviously, I don't think this is a controversial item, but do hope that people support this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Furman. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, on the motion to approve amending section 3.549B of the Madison General Ordinances to add the positions of Transit Chief Development Officer, Transit Chief Operating Officer, Transit Chief Maintenance Officer, and Transit Chief Administrative Officer to Compensation Group CG21, and adding or retitling the position elsewhere in the ordinances. Those in support of approval, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Chair believes unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, it will go down as unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Next item, Legistar 72614, our director's report.
Well, thank you. I'll be only here for a portion of the meeting, so I'll be brief. And then just want to say that Philip Gritzmacher will staff the meeting after I leave. I have family in town. Major items are the bus rapid transit bid package. In fact, we will be introducing the Early Works bid package to the Public Works Board this Wednesday with a hope to bid it in August. And then the main portion of the bus rapid transit will be bid probably in October, November-ish. Federal funding. At the end of May and then again at the end of June, there were quite a few notice of funding opportunities for federal funds where they're just new opportunities that really haven't been available to us before. They include the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, which could allow us to increase the number of quiet zones we have. The Reconnecting Communities Program, which could allow us to, let's say, for instance, bring connections across the Beltline or across Stoughton Road, and then the Safe Streets for All, which you'll hear a little bit about at the end of this meeting. It's basically a funding program targeting Vision Zero improvements, and we're well situated for that. Parking, we are in negotiations with Mortensen regarding the number of parking spaces, bus circulation, and how it's laid out. Mortensen is motivated to try and get some of the details nailed down because they do want to, I believe, open up this mixed-use development to student occupation in August, September of 26. So there's a pretty timeline on that. We've also interviewed for a parking manager, and so hopefully that selection will be announced within the coming weeks. Wisconsin DOT projects. The Wisconsin DOT has selected consultants on 3 major projects and will be increasing activity on those in the coming months. One is the I-3990-94 project. They had a kickoff meeting with local officials. Madison may be interested in the construction of a Hepker Road interchange, which would serve kind of the American Center and the UW Health facility. So those are items that are in our plans and are of interest to us. They also have 2 separate Stoughton Road projects, one from Highway 30 north and one from Highway 30 to the south. I believe they have local officials meetings on Tuesday of next week. Transit network redesign, consultants continuing to work on that. And then finally, I think that the passenger rail is exciting. We submitted actually 2 notice of interest to the Federal Register of bringing passenger rail to Madison. We have our contract with HMTB almost ready for signatures, where we'll do a location study. And then, we're hoping that this route will be included in the Federal Rail Administration's corridor identification program. So that's kind of a summary, and I'm open to any questions. And
Any questions for Tom? All right, seeing none, thank you, Tom. Let's see here. All right, then our next item is going to be Legistar 72615, speed policy on shared use paths.
yeah. So maybe Renee will do the bulk of this, but I might introduce it. There's been increased usage of e-bikes, and I think many of us feel like it's been positive in that it reduces motor vehicle travel. It really has increased the pool of people who are willing to bike. However, many of these many of these e-bikes are able to go fast, and many people will travel fast on our paths, and it's led to kind of an increase in complaints. And this has been ongoing probably for about 3 years, but the prevalence of e-bikes is just seems to be increasing, and so we thought maybe it's time to have a discussion on the issue and maybe possible remedies. And with that, Renee has a presentation to guide the discussion.
All right. So I'm going to just go through some of this with you fairly fast. Hopefully people have had some opportunity to look at it. All right. So I want to talk a little bit, as Tom mentioned, speeds, but also about just general etiquette and feedback that we've gotten, some things about legislation that people may or may not be aware of, so we can have kind of a fully featured discussion tonight about the issues of the popularity of our paths. All right, so I have a bunch of things that I typed in here. These have kind of been collected over the last 3 years, but a lot of them came in after someone posted on Nextdoor that we were very interested in getting comments. So that brought us a whole rash of comments. And I tried to categorize them a little bit. A lot of comments, as Tom mentioned, about people going too fast along with passing too close. Some people say that they have this experience with e-bike riders. Other people say it's more inexperienced e-bike riders. Some people say it's the racers, and then some people just say generally people on bikes. Definitely have gotten some comments around the idea of a speed limit, and this idea that during commute time is a particular time that they feel like this is an issue. Definitely get some comments around just the way that people choose to pass, and a feeling that maybe they're passing at times that they shouldn't be. Lots of, as you saw here, comments around the idea of audible warnings, from people who wish people did it more to people who feel like, sometimes people are doing it too close to them, too loudly. It's more startling. And then people have differing feelings about bells. And one person had a suggestion to have a bell ordinance, that everyone needed to have one. So definitely it's kind of, I would say, a little bit around all over on the audible warnings. And I think it just depends on if you're kind of where you're at. If you're kind of just walking along and you've kind of zoned out a little bit, obviously it can be kind of a surprise, right? We've all seen people jump when you've said things to them on the path. So definitely all over. So speed limits, definitely gotten some comments, as I mentioned, that people would like it, that it's dangerous during commute time. some people, like a suggestion came in that it should only be 10 miles per hour and that we should have speed feedback boards. Other people were like, well, 15 miles per hour. Some people were like, well, maybe just people should go reasonable speed, right? Because what's the appropriate speed is kind of depending on, when there's a water ski show, it's an appropriate speed is very different from, at night if you're going home from a night out, right? Someone suggested this idea of speed humps that has come up a few times. People have asked about that on the path. And then this idea about racing or high speed travel, people pushing back that they think people are going too fast. Then obviously we've gotten some comments too about other users, not just people who ride bikes. People feeling that when people walk facing traffic on the path, but it's just one or two people, that causes a lot of problems. But some people feel everyone should be on the left facing traffic. Even though we do recommend everyone traveling in the same direction. Complaints that people take up the whole path with no regard. Earbuds, lots of concerns that you can yell all you want, but people have earbuds in so they don't hear you. So why bother? And then just that idea that people don't like it. Like some people might yell at you if you give them an audible warning because you startled them. Just this whole thing, either people walking or biking in groups, taking up too much space. Runners, I got so many complaints about people running during the pandemic. They were too close, they breathed too heavy. So just, people had just a different feeling about space during that time. And then some things with dog owners always, that people are not using a leash or they're not using a short leash. And of course, pet waste disposal always comes up as a complaint everywhere, but has as well. So just people's suggestions. Some people want more signs. They want signs to be more clear. Some people say that there's too many signs. But a lot of also some really good comments about, the paths need to be wider as we have more people walking and biking. Unless we have more space, there's inevitably going to be more conflicts, and that we should have enough space that people don't have to go single file because people do want to be able to walk or bike together. And that is important, particularly if it's family with a child, right? That space is very important to them. So a lot of ideas around that. Just a few other things. Roller skiing has become more popular, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically skiing on wheels. So people have poles with them as well. Didn't used to be too popular, definitely grown in popularity. Also, all the new devices, probably you've seen some of the electric skateboards, these mono wheels. There's just a lot of new things out there on the market and people use them on the paths. And not everyone feels that they should, and they just really want to know too, when is a motorbike and what is an electric bike, and should some of these people be using the path? Because, right, with all of this new technology, it can be harder to tell. Other things, people wish that if they were exercising, they would go somewhere else, and that there should just be an area for that. If there's a heavy pedestrian use area, should people bike? It is a shared use path, obviously, but that feeling is out there. Some people who commute just wonder why there's an expectation that they should go slowly. They have to get to work on time. That feels wrong to them. And then a feeling everyone should just go single file, which other people felt like we need space to not have to do that. So definitely, just a lot as we see more people choosing walking, biking, and other modes of travel, these things are obviously issues that come up. And then after the Nextdoor posting, one of the neighborhood associations in Dungeon Monroe, who had already had a very strong interest in this topic, the path is very important to them. They definitely had concerns over etiquette and conflicts, did share this with the city as well. You'll see a few things here around speeds and the idea of this 15 miles per hour. And the idea that, the designs for paths generally were not built for an excess of 20 originally, although now there are e-bikes that can go faster than that, certain ones. And obviously a regular bike can go faster than 20. Especially going downhill, that's fairly easy to do on a nice bike that's lightweight if you want to. So then just a few things, because this electric bike definition is fairly new. It's, been around for a while now, but still fairly new. And they did create 3 classes of legal electric bikes. And as you can see, the first 2, to go over 20 requires the person to be working hard, whereas that class 3 e-bike will go up to 28 miles per hour with the assistance it provides. And 1 and 3 require pedaling. 2 has a throttle that does not require pedaling. Just some other things around labeling and the classification and how that all works. And you can click on all of this if you want to learn more about this. And then electric scooters were also around that same time legalized. And they are also a particular thing that cannot go more than 20 miles per hour. And they did just, put in some things. I did want to call out, it does say that you are supposed to give an audible signal when you're passing. Doesn't say what that is. Doesn't say it has to be a bell. Doesn't say you have to yell on your left. It doesn't say that, is shifting your gears loudly enough? What if you have a loud hub? Is that enough? It doesn't really say, but you are supposed to do that. And the one thing is that the electric scooter on a path is not supposed to go more than 15 miles per hour. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about scooters. There are a few more of them around, but they're not maybe quite as popular as the electric bicycle. And then some things about electric bicycles. They're basically the same, a vehicle, the same as a bicycle. They did remove this requirement for, say, having a driver's license or things like that, that were part of the old regulations. It does allow some other regulations by a municipality, if they so choose, for electric bicycles on bicycle ways. And the class 3s are not to be operated by people under 16 is the one kind of rule that they did keep that limits them a little bit more. So this kind of just calling out that we do have the ability to govern the use of electric bicycles when the power unit is in operation on bikeways. Electric scooters definitely have some ability to regulate those as well, both for operation and for parking and the rental companies that we don't have here at this time. Just other things that are kind of related to this issue. A path is considered highway in state statute, and a bike is a vehicle. Thus, our attorneys told me that 25 miles per hour would be the default speed limit on paths because they are not posted otherwise. Also, they cautioned that potentially having a speed limit, if someone received a ticket for that could impact their driver's license due to the way the statutes are written. So definitely something we would want to talk about, think about, maybe get some more information on if that's of interest. And they said there could be kind of just an ordinance around the idea of a safe speed that would not have that sort of implication. So to think about. Just a few community examples. And I should say not every state has their e-bike laws written exactly the same. There was a model statute that was supported by a national advocacy group, but it was implemented slightly different in different places. Colorado's is a little bit different than ours. So in the way it treats the class 1, 2, and 3 bikes, the 3 being the one that goes fastest. But they have done a trial and they did approve the 1 and 2 operating on trails. And they have an e-bike and e-scooter share program now. They do allow only up to 15 for the bike share bikes. Ours are capped at 17 currently, because they do have a courtesy speed limit on their paths. So it's not necessarily something that's enforceable. It's just something that they west. And then they do have a report problem just for reporting trail conflicts to let people have an ability to share out problems they're seeing. Boulder, pretty much open to class 1 and 2 e-bikes, except for some kind of open space parks, mountain parks. They also have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. They have e-bike and e-scooter rentals. Colorado Springs allows class 1. And they have some concerns just about the way the state law was written. So they had the idea that they would continue to expand it, but they have been waiting for their attorneys to kind of look closer at the state law. But the other Colorado cities have moved forward on similar things without that concern. Seattle has a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. There were various policies. Their path system is operated by parks, by their Department of Transportation, by their university, and a couple other agencies. But Seattle Parks operates a lot of them. They did a pilot allowing e-bikes and decided to go consistently with a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit, allowing e-bikes. They actually did a study and found similar travel speeds on average for pedal bikes and electric bikes. They did find that people who owned private e-bikes did go faster versus their bike share e-bike users, who were, they found, the slowest riders on average, going slower than people without electric assist and people who owned private e-bikes. And part of that is probably just learning, like a lot of new users don't really know how to operate the bikes and maybe haven't ridden for a while, tending to go a little bit slower. And they did install new trail etiquette signage and work with some nonprofit partners to get the word out on etiquette. Eugene also has class 1 and 2. In Oregon, the state, class 3 e-bikes are considered motor vehicles, so different than our law. But they really like, their electric water and electric board are offering e-bike rebate programs to get more people to buy them. But generally they are allowing them on their paths, except for one particular park. Park City also allowing 1 and 2 on their paved paths, and any soft like gravel or dirt path more than 5 feet. They have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. Some friends of mine who live there told me one park that's really popular with tourists does have speed boards because there was a lot of conflict there. They also work with a nonprofit just on path etiquette issues, both on and off-road. And in Houston, they did have 2 parks that had a 10-mile-per-hour speed limit, but they rescinded it. They actually had a fine, and I believe they did fine people $300 for going over it. But they eventually took those out and just put up etiquette signs. And they allow e-bikes except where posted. And I think that most of the exceptions came down when they removed the 10-mile-per-hour speed limit, because I think those were the same places they were limiting them. Just in case you're interested, some other places in Colorado did a literature review as they were working on this issue. One thing I thought was particularly interesting was this idea that once they let people try out an e-bike, those people were less opposed to them. They viewed them more favorably, but they definitely had a lot of pushback on the same way that we are also cities with a lot of Fort Collins, Boulder, lots of people using their paths. And then just there was a survey of e-bike owners that was done nationally. I think, it's interesting. Many older adults and people who said they had physical limitations really liked them because it made riding so much more possible for them. Younger people, they just wanted to have easier commuting. They saw it as a cost-effective solution. And then in this, the females in it were concerned about keeping up, carrying things, just the topography challenges. So pretty interesting to kind of see what e-bike owners are saying. And this kind of shows you lots of really great stuff here. Replacing car trips was a top reason for many people, and a top ranking first, working or living in a hilly area really jumps out, as does Here, a number of people were saying the first reason that they were using an e-bike was some type of medical condition, just made that much more feasible. So definitely some good stuff down here in the replacing car trips to really meet our goals as a city. We did do a couple of focus groups back a couple years ago, I guess now, just when this started cropping up more and more as an issue. First, we talked to bike clubs and teams, and, you know, kind of what was their take on this issue, you know, because we did get a lot of comments about people who are racers, people wearing Lycra, you know, people like that were seen as an issue. And, you know, they had some good stuff. You know, maybe we could work with some shops to get out information, not use the word bike path. And just talked about, you know, also the path crossings with motor vehicles seem to them, you know, that's kind of a big issue. It's where we see crashes. And this idea of separated space came up there too. And then we just asked some of the people who had sent some of the original concerns in if they would be willing to have a focus group and talk about it. We asked them kind of what would be your ideal path experience, and these were just some of the things that people said, a lot of things around respect, and just, you know, better understanding, and this idea that it's speed, not the bike. It's just, you know, a lot of interesting stuff came up in that discussion. And then we asked them about messaging and how we could frame this idea of multi-use, being part of a community, you know, some ideas on some of the slowdown signs that we put up originally on making them more visible. What should you say? So just, I think, really some interesting information that I wanted to share out. Here's some signs that we do have up. We have this larger one in English and Spanish in some places. This ride slowly when crowded got added near the Monona Terrace in 2019. And then just in the last month, we have this kind of temporary sign out in a few places where we know the path is really busy, or maybe where it changes from rural to urban. Also got some good comments on that when people saw it. So that seemed to resonate with people, easy to read, to the point. During 2020, during the pandemic, we had some signs out. They had etiquette. Also, you know, this idea of providing more space. We did some pop-up events with some basic etiquette message that moved around, and we had bells that we were giving out as we moved the signs around. Handed out bells this year, updating our brochure, and then did that path is for everyone sign out. So some small things that we have done over the last few years. And then I just have some discussion items just around etiquette signage, thoughts on that, on direct education, you know, doing a public information campaign and kind of, if you see that, where you see the value, you know, in the scheme of all the things that are going on. This idea of a speed limit, we definitely wanted to talk about that and get some input. This idea of, you know, providing more space, more separated space. Other safe options, I definitely hear from a lot of people who are like, well, that's where we go because that's where we feel safe. So as we increase more options for all ages and abilities, that could take pressure off the paths. Other things that are on your mind after looking at this, definitely want to hear that. We definitely hear sometimes in some neighborhoods that they don't feel as welcome, some parts of our community on the path as on others. So definitely also something we want to address, and then kind of what you think some good next steps that you would like to see. So I will turn it back over. I can leave this up, Tom, or I can take it down so we can have a discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks, Renee. We have a couple of registrants for public comment. I'll just get through those quickly first. Heather Hansen, District 6, 1833 Helena Street, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak. And Jack Keir, 1045 East Wilson Street, Madison, in opposition, not wishing to speak. Those are our only registrants. We did have several people submit written comments. A big group of those came to all of us this morning, and a few more trickled in. Those written comments will be attached to the item in Legistar. questions for Renee? Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks. And thanks for all the info, Renee. You pulled a lot of comments together. I guess my question is just on the issue of enforcement. You know, if we were to have a conversation about setting regulations and enforcing them, you know, clearly there's already some state laws in place about passing and stuff. And as far as I know, we're not enforcing them actively. So aren't we really just talking about putting MPD on the bike paths, like riding bikes or something, if we're serious about this?
Yeah, I mean, and Tom can jump in too. I mean, obviously, there are some places that have decided that they're going to put up these signs and they're going to enforce them, and others that have not enforced them. Obviously, you're all familiar with Vision Zero, and you know, and our focus is really on serious and fatal crashes and the causes of that. So this would be a departure from kind of that, and I'm not sure how resourced it would really be.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add to that. The you know, if you look at our motor vehicle laws, we really enforce just a fraction, you know, a fraction of our streets in the VMT. So instead, you know, this might just create maybe a culture of expectations, if you know what I mean. Like for instance, we don't have police generally stationed in our neighborhoods, and yet we're implementing 20 is plenty. But we're hoping to create a culture of expectations where people realize that they shouldn't be going 35 on a neighborhood street.
Thanks. I will save comments to see what other questions folks have.
Thanks, Chris. Alder Foster, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Renee, you mentioned Vision Zero and especially speed and enforcement of that. I think I know the answer, but where does path conflict fit within Vision Zero? Do we have any like hotspots on our path networks that are on the high injury network? Or, I mean, of all the comments and the feedback and everything else, what can you tell us about kind of actual injuries or safety concerns versus discomfort?
Sure. So we don't have, so our crash reports that we use for the high injury network have to involve a motor vehicle. And so all of the parts would be just intersections where there are motor vehicles. I have, however, reached out to get data like from EMS and the fire department, and it's pretty hard to pull out. And that's because this isn't something that happens a lot. So I don't have a number to give you. There are crashes. It definitely happens. Because they're not recorded in an easy way that's, you know, kind of online with the DOT like motor vehicles. It's kind of hard to pull them out. And as EMS has been looking at this, it's been really hard to find ones that don't have motor vehicles as a part of the crash. But I'm definitely trying to look at that. There are a few places, you know, like New York City has perhaps had a few more than most places, but it is a small number. And part of that is just, you know, you think of, I don't know, physics, and in a car is a motor vehicle is a large, heavy object. But there's definitely a strong perception of safety, of people not feeling comfortable. Actual crashes happen, but it is a small number, and many of them probably are not reported at all because they're so minor that there are not, you know, there's no medical attention needed.
Okay, so this really is in no way a Vision Zero initiative then. This is really about addressing concerns that people have shared about sort of etiquette and feelings of how they're experiencing the path.
Correct. It is not in our Vision Zero action plan.
And then my other question was, understanding we don't really have any like hotspots in terms of safety issues or crashes on the paths between different users, what's your sense, or what do we know about kind of hotspots in terms of complaints, in terms of conflict, in terms of, I would expect probably where we have the most users, where it's the busiest, where it's the most congested, but what can you share with us about that, like specifically, and then kind of how extended you think some of this is versus how concentrated?
Sure. So obviously, yes, the complaints are the heaviest where we have the heaviest use. So, kind of near east, near west, central on the Cap City path, on the southwest path. Those are very much hotspots. Some issues, as you're just entering into neighborhoods from the rural areas, right? So the Cannonball, as you're coming in from out of town, and you hit more of a residential area, some complaints there. Also, kind of as you're coming in from the Cap City onto the southwest path, and you get into the Allied Drive neighborhood, and there's just more people moving around. So definitely some complaints about that. But the biggest areas are, where we have the most people: downtown, near east, near west.
And actually, my last question, there's been a couple places where we've been able to expand the path, as either just widening them, or in some cases even having a sort of separate walking area versus biking area. What's the sense of, has that impacted complaints? Do we still get the same kind of complaints in those areas, or has that provided any relief from kind of what folks are experiencing there?
It's, obviously where we've done it, some of the areas, like near Monona Terrace are just so crowded. And people at this point, it's not a continuous facility, so they still have to cross back and forth. So it helps, but perhaps it's not really enough to say for sure what would happen if it was, more of a continuous. We also have fishing there. So definitely lots of issues. I think, on campus, where they have a lot of space on the western part of the Lakeshore Path, that is really, people really enjoy that experience and share that as something that they really like. So I think it can help, but I don't know if we have enough to say, if it totally gets rid of all of the issues.
Great. Thanks for all the background on this. Appreciate it.
All right, Alder Paulson, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
So we might be kind of early in all the processes here and kind of collecting feedback, but I'm just a little curious from sort of an equity toolkit, ResJ perspective. Are we feeling good about who we're getting feedback for, or are we missing folks yet?
So I think, if we wanted to pursue this more, there's a lot more work to be done in that area. Definitely have gotten some comments through a different sort of process, Let's Talk Streets, where we've heard from some people with some concerns about the way paths operate, that they're just moving through the neighborhood fast, and some things about, just what could make it more attractive. But I think there's more work to be done. And I think, with a speed limit, that raises some red flags that we would want to consider, right? There's been a few places where there have been concerns about, policing the paths and who's welcome and not welcome on the path. And does that increase that? So I think, if this is a direction of interest, that we would want to do more work on this, and do more of a ResG analysis and think about who would be excluded, and who this would impact differently. So.
Thank you.
All right, Alder Harrington McKinney, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Renee, and thank you very much for the introduction. And so I was very pleased to hear the question from the Alder about an equity analysis. And so when we're looking at those details, and you pretty much said that we're in the early stages, so we're not looking at education, we're not looking at enforcements per se, but this is an area that is of concern. So is there a plan to come back before the body with more detailed information? Great introduction. So this is more informational. So that's what my question is that what is the plan going forward?
Sure. So, and maybe Tom can jump in. I think we wanted to do something informational at this point and see where this board was at. And Tom, maybe you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think we wanted to begin the discussion, and really, it's a function of the board to kind of help direct our efforts towards policy. There are some people that would like to move towards perhaps a courtesy speed limit, and then there are people that are just saying that courtesy boards, like some of the temporary ones that have been put up this summer, educating people are maybe the direction we should move in. And so probably this is meant to begin the discussion and to get kind of overall directions and feelings from the board.
Just a follow-up question. Thank you very much. And the equity issue is one that I'm, of course, very concerned with, because we are encouraging more individuals to ride a bike, and that is currently not the primary mode of transportation for a lot of our communities, especially communities of color. And so if we're moving toward that direction, it is really imperative if we ask those questions related to who is left out and who's included, and how we look at overall, because there's been a lot of questions around this area, but we really want to know where those questions are coming from, so that we'll have a better cross-section of those communications. So thank you, and I just want to say thank you for your report. It was very, very informational. I'm complete.
Thank you. Alder Figueroa-Cole, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, Renee, and Jan for this report and your support on this topic throughout the past 18 months. This is a big issue on District 10. We have a few bike paths. So my concern has been and continues to be the point of education. I think we should have, you really should, the data presented is perfect. I appreciate that. And I think that should be part of the education campaign. But I wouldn't even be thinking about fines and enforcement and any of that stuff until we actually get serious about getting out there on the paper, on the radio, on the TV, whatever, just like nailing the message to the people to do the common sense, to have common sense on the bike lanes and make sure that they share. The signage is absolutely amazing. I think Foster had a good point there in regards when Renee was answering Foster's questions. It just kind of puts it into perspective that the problem is not in heavy areas. So we're not talking about optimizing the entire path system, but just in specific areas of more frequent travel. If people wants to take their bikes at a higher speed on an area that is not so heavily used, that doesn't have to be so tightly regulated. You know what I mean? Like, we're just talking about high density areas where the problems are. So sounds like we already identified which ones those are. And for me personally, I just really want to see an education campaign on this matter. Not really focus on enforcement at this moment, but just getting the message out there and letting people know that how dangerous it is for young kids and families to get, or even older adults, to be into a bike accident. So yeah, I guess I don't. My question will. Oh, the other thing that kind of like throw me off a little bit about understanding that our Safe Street campaign doesn't really include bikes. So that doesn't make much sense to me, because again, so we're trying to make the roads to be where vehicles are not at the center of the road. So we are actually making the roads more equitable, more inclusion on them. So I don't understand then why this is not at the core of the safety program. So I would like kind of maybe throw it out there to rethink that position. And again, I would like for the committee to just really support the issue of a educational campaign. But thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know that I have been on your, you guys are taking care of so many people from my area. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Evers, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, along the same lines of Alder Figueroa Cole, I would prefer that we don't go the enforcement route. We don't try to decide who can use the bike pass at different times or suggest that certain users don't belong. I do think that education can take place in a rather positive manner. I was reading some of the public comments, and while there's some sense of conflict and people are reactive and defensive, some groups, I really appreciated in your presentation that some of the bike clubs had some good ideas about how a positive messaging campaign can be shared through, bike shops and, on various listservs and just addressing the fact that these paths are for everybody. They are a shared facility. And I also noted, and I think it's worth reflecting on, that in some of the public comments, that the issue really is complex from a standpoint that when we really do try to implement the city's complete streets policy, residents push back on that as well if it means that they're going to lose some parking or be inconvenienced. So I wonder if some of these same people who are trying to push the bicycles off the bike paths are also the people who oppose our complete streets policy and protected bike lanes. If we're serious about bicycle safety and we're serious about encouraging people to use alternative forms of transportation that are not motor vehicles per se, then we need to think more of shared use, not just on the designated bike paths, but on our streets as well. And if we can move much more robustly in this direction, it seems like this problem begins to solve itself. But I do get a lot of complaints as an alder in District 13 with the Southwest Bike Path nearby. People particularly concerned about those who are training and going at a high rate of speed. And then what appears to be inexperienced users of e-bikes who are going at a high rate of speed. So maybe this can all be addressed with education. And I like the idea of like a friendly, not a speed limit, but a speed suggestion kind of thing. I saw one of those signs. I like that idea. I think suggesting 15 miles an hour in certain sections within the city as a friendly nudge, less an issue when you get more outside the city. But that's what I would recommend. Again, I don't have a question. It's just a long comment. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Carolyn, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much. Well, really excited and glad that you're raising these issues and drawing attention to them and listening to the questions and discussion here right now in this forum and the comments that we received from the community. It sounds like the issue involves not just safe speeds, which is definitely important, but perceptions of safety and issues of inclusion, especially in our multimodal universe. So practically speaking, my question is about kind of back to Vision Zero and back to complete streets. Is there any capacity in the programming or plans for safety culture work to encompass some of this rather than going in a speed and enforcement route?
Sure, that's a good question. I mean, I think if this becomes a priority, right, then we would prioritize doing this work. And I guess we're here to have that discussion as to kind of where this falls into your priority. We've been able to do some small things, but we could prioritize this over some other work, right? If we feel like this perception of safety is big enough, then we could switch some other things out for this, right?
Thanks.
All right, Alder Foster, you're next. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess just to that last point, I would not be in favor of moving this up to displace some of our priorities around actually improving safety. I think that we have clear data that this is not a major transportation safety issue. It can be really stressful. It can be really stressful to be walking down the path and have somebody fly by you too close on whatever wheels it is, even somebody running, whatever. Like it's real. And I think a lot of people go to the paths and don't want to feel stress. And so I don't mean to discount it, but I think we need to be really clear about what problem this is and what amount of resources we want to put into it, and be realistic about what we think we can achieve. I mean, part of this is just always going to be there. We could invest $1 million next year on an education campaign, and we could probably make some improvements, but there's going to be somebody that rides their bike too close, too fast. So I think we just need to kind of take it a little bit in stride as well. I'm definitely not a fan of the speed limit, even in like an advisory speed limit or something. I honestly just think it's really missing the point. I don't think speed is the primary issue. I think it's difference of speed and closeness. So when you pass people close, even at like 14 miles an hour, if you just go, enough to get around them, it's very easy to startle somebody that's walking at 3 miles an hour if you go by at 14 or 15 or 12. And if you're going 17, it doesn't really matter. And if it's a wide path and nobody else is out there and you go all the way to the edge to get around them and you're going 18 miles an hour and you ring your bell before you do it, nobody would even think anything happened. So I just really think it's a distraction to be focused on speed. We know that speed kills when it gets above 15, 20 miles an hour and you're in a car. But we are not actually having a speeding problem, in my opinion, on our path network, and I don't think we should be focused on speed limits or enforcement. I do think there's room on the education front, but I think we also just need to be. We shouldn't have higher expectations than are realistic. I think we should invest some energies in it and continue to do that. I like kind of hotspot targeting. Let's try and do more education where we're seeing more of the issues. And would love to see some education that's more kind of generalized, that's maybe not even on the path itself. I've got some ideas. I'm sure lots of folks have some different ideas, but I could totally get behind working on like a little video, especially if it's kind of funny or something that would, people would actually share with each other that could really highlight some of the stuff. Because I think there's a lot of folks that really just don't realize what they're doing is getting into other people's spaces. So I think there is room for education. In terms of the signage stuff, I really like signs that are less content heavy, very few words, ideally. I don't think the reminders, printing more stuff, explaining stuff in more detail is not going to help at all. It's a little bit of a distraction for me personally. And then everybody, once you see it the first few times, then you're not even looking at it anymore. So I think to the degree we are going to put stuff on path, I think the one that was the ride slowly when crowded and just shows the different user types, like that one is the kind of one that I think are a little bit more effective. It's pretty simple. I don't like ones that just say slow down just all the time, like in big caps, slow down. Because I'm like, well, how do you even know how fast I'm going? So no matter what I'm doing, I'm wrong. You're just going to tell me to slow down. It just doesn't feel good. It's not what I want to. I don't want that when I'm on the path, to be honest with you. And I just feel like it's setting a weird vibe up. So I would say focus on that, get some nice clean signage, keep it simple, use pictures where possible. So we don't need, have like language barrier stuff, put them up. I like the rotating temporary kind of stuff, in good season where there's a lot of users there. Maybe work on a video or social media kind of stuff with some catchy messages, funny. I think that would be cool. And then the last thing is we should be looking at more space. So I think we should be tracking on where do we know we've got the highest congestion and what do we know about it? Is it just, during some peak commute times? Do we have more sustained crowding on the paths? And I know it can be really challenging in some places to think about expanding them, but I think it should be a work project for us. I think we should know what paths we'd like to expand, and start talking about that and get some of those into our Safe Streets Madison program, and get some more room for folks, because I think that's probably going to actually do the most to reduce some of that conflict. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Hopefully we can get with Scott to fund a flex lane for our bike paths. Alder Paulson, go ahead, please.
I see that our traffic engineer maybe wants to jump in on something. So if he wants to jump ahead of me.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Paulson. Thank you, Tom. Really quick, regarding the Vision Zero enforcement component. I agree that it's going to be really hard for us to, shift our focus, from, more kind of, data and safety oriented education, to this. But I do want to point out that I do think that, we are trying to build a better safety culture here in Madison, involving everyone, the drivers, bicyclists, pedestrians. So I do think some of those, education components will help on the issue when, everyone has more, safety culture in mind, even though we may not directly targeting it. So thank you.
Thanks, Yang. Go ahead, Alder Paulson.
I'll start out by saying that I haven't ridden a bike in 20 years. And I do not want to ride a bike. You're not going to get me on a bike. You can't talk me into one. But for me, it's like camping. I also never want to go camping, but I am in favor of expanded parks. And for the people who want to go camping, more power to them. Have a great time. And so I'm like that with bikes. I think bikes are fantastic. Our platinum bike rating is a great asset for the city. I'm not going to get on a bike. But that means that I don't have a lot of like firsthand experience with what's happening out there. So this is going to be sort of a stupid sounding question. But is the culture on different bike paths sort of consistent across cities and nations, or is it really sort of location specific? If I move up to Madison from Atlanta, and I was a big bike path user there, would I be shocked at the way we do things here, or is there? So I'm just trying to understand how much culture do we have to sort of is already established. Do we need to establish culture? Is culture sort of being established as people are getting out and doing things, and e-bikes are bringing more people out? And I'll just mention that my husband got an e-bike a month ago, and I wouldn't mind us banning e-bikes because I haven't seen him on weekend afternoons in a month. Because he's off on that thing, and so right. Anyway, apparently they're great fun, but he's not going to get me on it. So he's tried.
So that's a fair question, but I have to warn you, I like biking to go camping, so I'm maybe not trustworthy. So I would say that cities that have a large rate of walking and biking, so kind of peer cities, Portland, Fort Collins, Boulder, it doesn't feel different, right? Like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of interest, and there's also a lot of sort of these kind of conflicts. And I would say, however, since the pandemic, you probably feel more the same in a lot of other cities because walking and biking has grown so much in some places where you might have gone out on the paths and you didn't have any different culture because there weren't very many people out there. But I would say those places are starting to feel more like the places that have lots of walking and biking in terms of, I think you hear speeding, passing too close, people walking in big groups or biking in big groups, taking up too much space. Like the culture really, I don't think across the US is that different. And I think, there's some places that have maybe greater personal space versus other places and, kind of just little unique things. But I would say generally, I hear the same things from other communities that, everyone's supposed to travel on the right, but some people like to go different feelings about how people should pass, exacerbated by the pandemic as people want more personal space than maybe they even did pre-pandemic, but more people out there using these spaces. So I don't know if that was a good answer, but
All right, thank you. Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I guess I'll just speak to Alder Paulson's question a little bit. I don't see it anymore, but I remember when I first moved to Madison, I noticed people were pretty enthusiastic about self-policing and, calling out people who are behaving wrongly in their eyes. So I think, there is a lot of potential there to build a culture of safety, whatever that means to folks. And just for the sake of giving clear guidance to the city, it seems pretty clear that enforcement is not the route to go. And working on those building up those cultural cues and we're not going to, as we saw, people think there shouldn't be dogs, there shouldn't be people listening to music. We're not going to regulate all that out. So it's really just about, using the space more responsibly. And so simpler signs and education, I think, are going to be the way to do that. Something that's occurring to me, there might be other opportunities. Like, I think somewhere down the line, we will probably want to get more serious about wayfinding throughout the city. And there might be an opportunity there to sort of direct cyclists to an appropriate low stress route that isn't the path, and do some of that at some point. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Carolyn, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, on the question of direction. So maybe if it doesn't fit into a Vision Zero program, then maybe Complete Streets would be an appropriate place for this work, under the idea of it's not just infrastructure, right? It's not just a matter of providing infrastructure. It needs to be welcoming and inclusive, a place that people want to be, a place that encourages and invites and supports multimodal transportation. And indeed, all across the country, in many places, the response to multi-use paths is both to embrace them in some cases, but also to feel completely excluded by one's race or ethnicity or ability on the path, one's mode. Gender is a big issue, and we see that in a lot of these comments. So I think when I use the word culture, what I mean is that sort of sense of allowing for a lot of diversity and inclusion in these spaces. And so that's not going to show up in your safety metrics because that's not measured. Crashes won't happen because folks won't even use the infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think, we've done around that is still pretty small. We've heard some things at the Transportation Commission in talking about the Cannonball Path and just the location of it, and hearing from women who felt like that wasn't safe necessarily all the time, and that they would often choose the road over the path. We've also heard some things from people in some listening sessions about wanting more, like they didn't understand why the paths are just getting from point A to point B. Where do you sit down and enjoy the space, right? And so we do have a new project on the Cannonball where we're putting in a bench and trying to create kind of that space that came out of hearing from a different community who felt like this is the weirdest thing. Why is this just like I need to go here to there? Why can't I just enjoy this space? So I think there's a lot more work to be done around that. And it does raise a different kind of safety and makes them feel different to people and more included in those experiences. I think with the John Nolan Drive project, some of that will be coming out as well about space and how it feels and how it's used. I mean, we always have the conflicts with fishing and walking and biking, and everyone's in this small space. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around the expanded idea of welcoming and safety as well.
All right, it looks like we've run out of questions. Renee, do you want to bring up that slide that you had close to the end that had sort of your asks, your things you wanted us to consider, think about? So a lot of folks have already covered these in either their questions or comments that have already been made. Do folks have any other comments for any of these discussion items? Any other ideas for now? Renee, I think I've seen you writing things down. Do you feel like you've got a lot of this covered? I know this isn't the last time that we're going to talk about it. Yeah, do you feel like you've got a good start from us?
So I think I have a good start. I think it's just kind of this desired next steps. I feel like this sort of education, idea is kind of where people are falling. If there was a speed limit, it might be more like, courtesy, or more like when crowded, that kind of idea. So I think just kind of what you guys would like for next steps here, I think I got some good information to take back and to work on this.
Okay. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just some clarity on that, I guess. I think it would be good to see like what different messaging concepts could look like. I noticed the yellow ones that are out on the Cap City Trail, and I like them, but then I also liked Alder Foster's point about simpler being better. And talking through the idea of a courtesy speed limit, I don't think I like the idea, partly because, as Alder Foster said, I don't think speed in general is the problem. I think it's confusing, because folks won't know if it's a rule or a suggestion, and I don't think folks even know their speed typically, so.
I mean, I just would say that is a very good point. There are a few limited instances where people have to have a speedometer on an electric bike, but generally it's more of a guesstimation of your speed.
All right, Alder Foster, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Just in addition to what Chris mentioned, I would be interested in some follow-up on the facility changes section. And maybe as a first step, just really kind of identifying on a map kind of what those known sort of congested areas are. I know there's, looked at that for the Southwest Path, for example, the work that's going on right now around John Nolan and Law Park. Obviously, that will be a big question, kind of what that ends up looking like. But maybe just sort of what we know right now about where we think we are experiencing congestion, kind of what we know about it. And then either, are there any options to relieve some of that stress, or kind of where are we at, or, what do we know about kind of path width or separation of modes and how that can improve things for folks. So I'd be interested in some follow-up on that as well.
All right, Alder Furman, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I agree with just about everything Alder Foster said today about this particular topic. I think there are some simple things we can do. I don't think this is priority based on a lot of the other Vision Zero thing. I did also want to mention the speed limit thing. I know residents all the time all of a sudden have like a built-in speed detector when they see cars speeding on the street. They'll tell you exactly how fast a car went. And so I could see that same situation with bike paths where somebody was saying, a bike just went by at 40 miles an hour. And, I was able to time that in my head. So I'm not a fan of the idea of speed limits. I agree that, as Alder Foster said, people are going to be startled at 11 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour if they're going to be startled. So I think there's some good ideas with education, et cetera, and really do appreciate all the work. I will point out it is pretty hilarious to see the polar opposite feedback in this presentation. That was not surprising, but I mean, there is no right answer here. You're not going to make everybody happy here, but I think these are shared paths, and we we'll continue to try to figure out the best way to continue to make them sure to pass. Thanks.
Right. Let me see here. Does look like we did have a later registrant that does wish to speak. Laura, 4421 Mandrake Road, Madison, neither in support or opposition wishing to speak. Laura, are you with us?
Looks like no one by that name is present.
Okay. All right, then. We have a couple of other registrants here. I want to repeat them. I'll just say them again here. Heather Hansen, 1833 Helena Street, support, not wishing to speak. Jack Keir, 1045 East Wilson, opposed, not wishing to speak. And Cherie Miller, 107 Sutherland, in support, not wishing to speak. All right. Are there any other questions, comments on this item? Renee, it sounds like you have kind of what you're looking for, at least at this stage. We'll likely be talking about this again at some point. So thank you everyone for your feedback. All right. Last call for questions and comments has not yielded any hands. So we will move on to our next item, which is Legislar 71167, incorporating health and safety goals, strategies, and actions into the city's performance excellence framework.
Thank you, Chair. As I pull up my presentation today, I want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Kratowitz. I also go by Kara. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Performance Excellence Specialist in Human Resources Organizational Development. Been with the city for 7 years, spent 4 of those years in finance as the data projects coordinator, and then in 2020 as interim deputy mayor before coming back to this role, in which I am tasked to help create systems level policies and frameworks to help us meet our vision as a city, which is our Madison, inclusive, innovative, and thriving. And I'm here along with my colleague, Jessica Jones, who I'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce herself.
Thank you, Kara. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Jones. I'm a data analyst in the data innovation team, which is housed in the finance department. If you're not familiar with the data innovation team, we are a citywide resource for data policy and analysis, and we have been working with the data aspects of results medicine. Through our work with results medicine, the data team became part of this project in the summer of 2021, when I worked on the development of the health strategies we are presenting today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. We'll hear more from her in a moment. I want to take you through a few key terms we'll use today that I hope they're familiar to most of you before we begin this presentation. So our Imagine Madison Comprehensive Plan is that state statutorily required plan intended to provide that 20-year vision for growth across the city with a 10-year approach for implementation. Within our plan, we have elements, which are our priority topic areas, explaining how we achieve our vision of our Madison, inclusive, innovative, and thriving. Under each element, there are a suite of goals, which are statements for that outcome. What do we want to see in the future state if we are able to successfully realize our vision? Within each element, there's also a series of strategies, which are general approaches to achieving the goals. And then under each strategy, there are a named list of specific actions. And so by the end of our presentation here today, we want to help you understand why health and safety is here before you, how it fits into the work we're already doing, and to provide you with an overview of the process to develop the list. So again, this is in 71167. There's a direct list, and the item that's within the list that called us to refer this to your committee is strategy number 6. You're welcome to give input on the entire list, and I encourage you to take notes on questions, thoughts, and ideas as we move through this presentation on the list. So moving from imagination to results, it's one thing to have a plan, it's another thing to create results. And in 2018, when the Imagine Madison Comprehensive Plan was adopted, there were actually 6 elements of a great city established in that plan. And our ability to adopt performance excellence in the same year had called out a 7th element in addition to that. We really needed a framework that included a suite of elements that can help us realize all of our city services under a framework that can help us break down silos across the organization towards the real outcomes that we care about in our community that we're hearing from. The Imagine Madison Comprehensive Plan had over 15,000 touch points with Madison residents and was really ground truths in the input from those residents. That resource of strategies and actions tied to those elements is being used in our decision-making structures, specifically our implementation of Results Madison, which is our performance management framework that is intended to create an outcome budgeting system, aligning our budgetary requests to those elements and outcomes that we want to see happening in our community. We heard feedback from specific agencies in prior years when we used only our 6 elements that a health and safety list was really essential to round out this suite of elements if we were really going to be able to successfully align budgetary needs to outcomes that matter most to Madison residents. So what we did was take those 6 elements of the comprehensive plan that you see here, and with the performance excellence system in the same year, adding the 7th element of health and safety, we're here to talk to you about the specific list that was created to establish the vision for where health and safety is headed in the coming decade before this gets folded into Imagine Madison's future comprehensive planning update processes. So what we did to start this process was to use Appendix A of Imagine Madison's comprehensive plan. This was rather our prescription for ourselves to hold ourselves accountable, to not talk about everything under the sun that the City of Madison is trying to work on, but to really establish a visionary future state for where we could head in the coming decade with our implementation of a suite of goals, strategies, and actions aligned to the other elements while not creating redundancy across the list. So that really was no more than 9 strategies with no more than 4 actions for each strategy. We began this process in the spring of 2021. I had worked with an intern through our University Alliance partnership, which is a partnership between the City of Madison and the University of Wisconsin-Madison to further problem-solving efforts by partnering project ideas with students, professors, and faculty across both institutions. And that intern at the time was a member of our Public Safety Review Committee. I taught him a strategy that we learned through our What Works Cities partnership called tactical data engagement, which is intended to use open data that exists across public meeting channels to synthesize what were we already hearing in 2020 from our community. We know in 2020 we were in the search for a new police chief, and the Police and Fire Commission led extensive efforts to outreach our community to understand their priorities around public safety and what they wanted to see in that police chief search. We also saw after the murder of George Floyd an increasing number of registrants on our common council meetings, our public safety meetings, talking as activists in our community, wanting to show up in public space and talk about policing reform. We supplemented the commentary that was synthesized across those public meeting channels throughout 2020 with a series of surveys and interviews of city agencies. That information was synthesized into a milestone report out to the Public Safety Review Committee in the spring of 2021, and it resulted in a list of 5 strategies and 20 actions, which are listed on page 2 of the list that you have in your Legistar attachment. And I will turn it over to Jessica to speak on the health side.
Thanks, Kara. Okay, so as mentioned before, I worked on the development of the health strategies in the summer of 2021. And the process of creating them was basically divided in 2 phases. We started with a research phase where we learned about the principles and history of public health. We analyzed community feedback and Dane County health data to understand the current health status of our city. We read public health published plans to learn more about its current services and future goals. And we researched about other communities' health strategies to draw some inspiration. During this phase, we're guided by Public Health Supervisor Cinder Boger and Public Health Planner Justice Biggin. After that, we moved on to the development phase, in which we first created a draft of strategies based on the previous research. And then we engaged in a co-creation process through interviews and working sessions with 38 subject matter experts from public health and other city agencies. During this phase, one of our biggest challenges was to avoid redundancy, as Kara has mentioned before. And what do I mean by redundancy in the context of health strategies? Well, first, all the other elements of Imagine Medicine were written under a health lens. And on top of that, public health today has a heavy focus on social determinants of health. If you're not familiar with social determinants of health, they are the conditions in which our residents are born, live, and work as they determine a person's health. So, for example, access to affordable housing has a big impact on the health of our residents, but it is already addressed in the neighborhoods and housing element, and so it is not included in the health strategy list. As a result of this co-creation process, we came up with 4 strategies and 15 actions. Naturally, most of those actions have public health as their lead agency and include some of its initiatives and programs. In terms of including input from marginalized communities, in the research phase, we analyzed community feedback. That included the 2019 Dane County Community Health Needs Assessment, which combines population health data in addition to feedback gathered from the community through input sessions and interviews, and has a special focus on marginalized communities. It also included public health strategic plans and reports, as they also address health inequities and get input from marginalized communities. And whenever available, we analyze data on the disparities of health outcomes for marginalized populations specifically. You can go to the next one, Kara. Thank you. Okay, so after we separately draft the health and safety strategies, the staff team combined this individual list into a single list and shared it with the mayor's management team and referred subject matter experts for additional comments and an update of status from lead agencies. Once we received input from the mayor's management team and subject matter experts, we integrated comments into the updated list that we're presenting today and started to circulate it with the mayor and council members. Our current step is this adoption process to include the list in the 2023 budget. Can you go to the next one? Thank you. As for our steps in the adoption process, the staff have introduced this list to the council on May 10th and received feedback from the Public Safety Review Committee on June 8th and the Board of Health on July 14th. As of now, our next steps include presenting it to the Plan Commission as our lead referral on July 25th, and then present the final list with recommendations to the Council on August 2nd. All the committees that you see in this slide have been chosen based on their relation to the city issues around health and safety. So naturally, we include you to hear your questions and feedback related to the safety strategies around transportation, but we are also welcome to reveal and discuss the whole set of strategies and actions. Can you click the next one, please? Thank you. And before we wrap on this presentation, we would like to share with you a list of considerations we ask committee members to keep in mind when reviewing the list. First, this lists an effort to establish a vision for where city service investments are headed in the coming decade as it relates to health and safety in the Madison community. However, this list is not intended to be a comprehensive list of what we already do. We also want to acknowledge that we are always operating in a changing environment. And as a result, this list aims to be specific enough to guide action, yet nimble enough to leave room for growth and future iterations. All actions have at least one lead agency assigned to them. But it is important to note that the lead agencies are not required to completely implement this strategy and or action alone. Together, city services across agencies will work to accomplish them. And last, we ask you to keep an open mind, focusing on how can we mindset while balancing our ability to realistically realize this strategy or action in the coming decade. And lastly, there is one more update I would like to share that is not included in these slides. And it's given the changing landscape with the Supreme Court's ruling, staff has considered how this topic could be addressed in the health and safety materials. We have reached out to subject matter experts to develop language and potentially include reproductive justice actions to the list, but we have not completed this step yet. So I want to let you know there may be an amendment from the floor regarding this when the health and safety materials are slated to go before the Common Council on August 2nd. Okay. Thank you, Kara. We can go to the next one.
All right, thank you. Questions? Chris, go ahead, please.
I think the obvious question in my mind is, where is this list?
Yes.
The link in the email PDF didn't work for me, so it's unclear.
Go to Legistar 71167. The health and safety goals, strategies, and actions PDF is the list.
Okay. And these are from the Imagine Madison plan, or this is a new list?
Right. So this is a complementary list that will be integrated into future Imagine Madison plan updates that was independently created over the course of the last, I think, like 18 months when you total up where we are today and starting in the spring semester of 21 with that intern from Public Safety Review Committee working with us to draft the safety side. And then Jessica leading on the health side, and then that combination effort. So this was to describe how the list was created, to give you that background. And then the list itself, I want to draw you back to strategy 6 is the one that's specific to your committee. But as Jessica mentioned, we welcome questions, commentary, feedback on the entirety of the list.
Thank you.
Alder Harrington-McKinney, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Kara, I am so very, very pleased, and also Jessica, when you integrate the term socially determinants of health and how that's connected. I must apologize. I have vision issues today, and so I'm not able to really peruse the data as I would have liked to. But that is so critical of how we are moving forward in Madison, and for us to understand how critical those social determinants of health are integrated into everything that we're doing moving forward. And so, as you can share share with us the data points, and to make sure that we have all the information that we need to understand how this is totally connected to transportation and our city of Madison. I would so appreciate it. I've been missing this, and I'm hoping that we do begin to look at the socially determinants of health, and also look at strategies of how we make decisions about how we're spending money and how our budget is going and what the priorities are. And so I don't have much to add because I have not read all the data, but I am so pleased that you have come before us so that we can really look at this in some seriousness. Thank you so very much. Appreciate your work.
All right, Carolyn, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. And I echo what Alder Harrington-McKinney says. This is nice progress. And so I'm looking, and so in the presentation that you made, there's sort of a list of sort of elements in the vision, the one that has the kind of periodic table graphic design. And so health and safety is one element of this, but in the social determinants framework, many of these things would be reinforcing health and safety. So that's something that I think could be called out a little more. So while I'm extremely happy that transportation gets its own section, something like housing doesn't get its own section. And right, like I would, like a housing first, or like just housing, I would even maybe put above transportation in a lot of this. So that would be a place where I'd like to have a crosswalk between these.
I appreciate the commentary. We'll call it neighborhoods and housing is one of the other 7 elements. And if you flip to the back or look in Imagine Madison's Appendix A that we use as our template, there is a really great list of strategies and actions for neighborhoods and housing. But I like your commentary about this crosswalk, because really those elements, we don't want them to create new silos for our organization. We want it to spur the potential of multiple agencies seeing themselves aligned to the outcomes for those elements, and that they can collaboratively work together to achieve those goals that we've set forth in these plans, and what we're trying to complement with the addition of health and safety's goals, strategies, and actions. And that the breaking down of agency silos to see themselves as collective contributors to those shared elements and their associated goals, strategies, and actions is really the objective here. But I think that crosswalk really resonates with me personally, because it's we don't want to create new silos with the elements. It is an intersectional approach.
Does that mean that there's a health and safety element within the land use and transportation set of strategies?
Health was used as a lens throughout the entire plan.
Okay.
It was one of the lenses that Imagine Madison had prioritized.
I follow you. Okay.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Kara said in terms of health being used as a lens. I believe that even for the affordable housing strategy, there is a language about taking a public health approach to affordable housing. So they made sure to actually include that in the other elements. From our list, from the health and safety, we kind of put health and safety as a priority, but there's a little bit of other aspects that are linked to it.
Great, thank you. Alder Figueroa-Cole, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. When looking at your the goal strategy section of MPD and fire for safety, MPD is working on their the strategic planning for the next 5-7 years. They have a consultant on the table working on that, and right now they're actually starting to put together the public engagement and community outreach. Are you guys part of that process?
We have not been included in that process to date, although John Patterson had been working closely with us as key subject matter expert, and it had been through multiple iterations in the current state of this list. And I just want to reinforce that the intent is to fold this list into the Imagine Madison Comprehensive Planning updates, and we know that with Jessica's reminders to know that there's room for future growth and iterations of this list. We know that concurrent planning was happening with MPD and that it wasn't necessarily to wait for that 5-year plan to be completed in order to adopt this list to help guide our budget process. So we have not been included today, or at least I have not personally. I can't speak for Jessica.
Thank you. I mean, again, I guess I missed that this is just to put on the comprehensive plan. Is really no direct action taken then with those goals.
Sorry, it is being used in the city's annual budgeting process. So the draft list was included. So what happens as agencies draft their budget proposals, they have to say, which element am I working on and which strategy is this helping us advance? And so this list has become part of this year's process in an iterative way, and any changes to the list will be updated for future iterations in the city's annual budgeting process. So it's really helping us guide our decision-making and investment towards a visionary future state that will be iterated and improved upon over time.
Got it. And that's what when you're talking about silos, that's what you mean. Then you'll be able to have a clear picture of who's using the same elements so they can be better connected.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for Kara or Jessica? All right, seeing none, thank you again for the presentation. Is there a motion? Alder Furman, go ahead, please.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, McKinney.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of recommending approval of incorporating health and safety goals, strategies, and actions into the city's performance excellence framework, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand.
Just abstain.
Okay, one abstention by Chris. Chair believes it's unanimous otherwise, other than the one abstention. So that carries. All right, our next item then is Legistar 71147, authorizing the planning division's shift to a planning framework with 13 higher level area plans to be updated every 10 years.
Good evening. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Urvashi Martin with the Planning Division, here to present the proposed planning framework to simplify and standardize the way the city does sub-area planning to make it more equitable. So a little bit of background how staff came up with this proposed planning framework. The 2018 comprehensive plan had recommended to develop a process to consider retirement of outdated sub-area plans. And that was kind of the impetus that led to this proposed planning framework. Staff did some research and conducted some interviews with 10 cities to get some insights on how other cities approach sub-area planning. Also, staff worked with the guidance from Plan Commission through various work sessions in the last 1.5 years or so to shape this proposed planning framework. Also, a racial equity social justice analysis was conducted on this proposed planning framework. And also staff worked with other city agencies to coordinate and see how this framework interfaces and coordinates with other plans and initiatives that other city agencies work on. So there are 5 primary benefits to this proposed planning framework. The first being a clear plan recommendation. Right now, the city has over 70 sub-area plans, and there are certain areas where these plans overlap. So there are multiple plans and overlapping recommendations, and that can create confusion. When a development proposal comes in, staff has to look at these multiple plans, and there are multiple recommendations that can sometimes conflict and also result in confusion. There could be stakeholders who might use one recommendation that supports their preference. So that doesn't work very well. So having this type of a framework will allow to have just one plan in place that's updated frequently. And so it will allow for a clear plan recommendation. Also, another benefit of this framework is full city coverage. Right now, there are certain areas in the city that do not have a plan in place, and that could be a disadvantage. Having a plan in place can allow for city investments and also guide future change. So there are certain areas of the city that do not have a plan, and so having this type of an approach will allow for covering the entire city, and there will be a plan in place for every corner of the city. Also, this type of a planning framework will allow for more frequent plan updates. Right now, there are certain sub-area plans that date back to the 80s and 90s, and a lot has changed since then. Some of these plans don't reflect the current city priorities and also current city policies, and they're very outdated. So having this type of a framework in place will allow for these area plans to be updated more frequently, and staff is envisioning that these area plans will be updated on a 10-year cycle. Also, this type of a planning framework will allow for more consistent plan topics and higher level recommendations. Right now, there are sub-area plans that cover or vary on the type of topics they cover. There are some plans that focus on sustainability while others don't. Having this type of a planning framework will allow to have a consistent list of topics that these area plans will cover. And the example area plan mockup, which is included in the materials, kind of provides that list of consistent topics that these area plans will cover. Also, these area plans will provide higher level recommendations. So right now, the sub-area plans that the city has, they vary in the level of details with their recommendations. Some recommendations could be very detailed and prescriptive and can oftentimes are beyond the control of the city and create a false sense of expectation. So these area plans will provide more higher level recommendations that would be supported by processes like street reconstruction or tools like the zoning code for implementation of the plan recommendations. Also, this planning framework would provide for increased coordination on city initiatives. Having a planning framework like this in place and the area plans being updated on a set schedule will have several benefits. And the primary benefit being that it will allow city staff to communicate clearly with stakeholders when an area plan will be created and when that would be updated. Also, it will allow for more increased coordination with other city agencies. So, for example, the Economic Development Division, they do their business surveys and business walks. Those could be coordinated with these area plans and could be used to inform these area plan processes. Also, having this type of coordination, the area plans community engagement or feedback that is received from those processes could be used by other city initiatives, and that would help not only reduce city costs associated with engagement, but also can address engagement fatigue, which we oftentimes hear from stakeholders when multiple city agencies go and ask stakeholders the same question. This is an example of the area plan mockup that illustrates the various consistent list of topics that these area plans would cover. Also, this is a map from the example area plan mockup to kind of illustrate what the kind of the scale of these area plan geographies would look like. And this is for the West area. This is an example of the area plan process and timeline. So the area plan process would involve these 6 steps, starting from seeking authorization to proceed with these area plans all the way up to step 6, which is plan implementation. And community engagement and feedback will be woven into all these phases of the planning process. So you might ask, what will happen with the existing sub-area plans? So the recommendations which are in the existing sub-area plans will be used to inform these area plans if, 1, they're within the scope of the area plan recommendation, 2, if they're consistent with current city policies, and 3, if they're relevant to the area plan communities. Recommendations in the existing sub-area plans that do not meet these 3 parameters will remain in the existing sub-area plans unless those plans are retired. These area plan processes will provide an opportunity for staff to review and consider potential retirement of older sub-area plans. So staff will come up with a detailed process on potential retirement of older sub-area plans as staff works on authorizing the resolution for proceeding with the area plans. So going forward, Planning Division staff will be working on these 12 area plans. So initially, staff had recommended 13 discrete geographies for area plans, but we received some feedback from Alder Forster, and staff have consolidated the 13 geographies to 12. So the far north and far northeast were combined into one geography, and the northeast area plan geography was expanded to the north to include the area north of the airport. So we have consolidated these 13 area plans to 12 area plans. In addition to the area plans, Planning Division staff will also work on focused Cdbg neighborhood development plans that cover areas that have a higher proportion of residents living with lower income and people of color. If there is a critical need or opportunity arises, for example, like a situation with Oscar Mayer, staff will work on a focused amendment to the area plan. So that would avoid creation of any other sub-area plan and adding another layer of confusion. So what the next steps are with this proposed planning framework, we are here before you tonight to get your recommendation for adoption of this proposed planning framework. After this, we'll be going to the Plan Commission for their recommendation, and then to the Common Council for their consideration of adoption of this proposed planning framework at the August 2nd meeting. And after the Council adopts this proposed planning framework, the next step would be to seek authorization to proceed with the first area plan. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair, for questions and discussion.
Thanks, Urvashi. Questions? Alderman McKinney, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Would you go back to the point where you said that the consolidation of the 13 into 12? Could you say more about that so I can have a better understanding of the framework related to that? Thank you.
Yes. So initially, staff had recommended 13 area plan geographies. And we had some discussion, and one of the feedback we had received from Alder Foster was that if the far north and the far northeast area plan geographies could be combined into one, and staff saw some merit to that and decided to consolidate that geography. And because of that, the Northeast area plan geography was modified slightly. So it was extended slightly to the north to include this area north of the airport.
Okay, my final follow-up question is that in that consolidation from the 13 to 12, was there a consultation with alders related to that district, or was it just all within one alder's district? I'm having a difficult time seeing where that boundary line is.
I think that I'm not sure if the alders with that district were consulted, but other staff members have communicated this with the alders and have a discussion. And also this framework was presented to some of the other committees. And so this was probably covered in some of those discussions as well.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think the one you mentioned, the feedback I had about consolidation, so it's nice to see that it's gotten down a little bit more. I think it'll just help us keep them more current, which I think is really the most important thing is when we've got old plans, I think they really start to create some conflicts. So in that same vein, you touched a little bit about sort of how previously adopted neighborhood plans or special area plans would be incorporated or not. And I think my only concern I'll raise there is, because a lot of our ordinances related to zoning require plan consistency. I do worry. I've just had enough times where 25-year-old plans, people are going through them with a fine-tooth comb and find some statement, and then all of a sudden we have some, like no one's even debating that it should or shouldn't be, but it's in that plan. So I guess I just wonder a little bit about the wisdom of kind of leaving them in that space where, I think it's great for them to be reference materials. Obviously I would expect staff to be reviewing them, pulling out all the stuff that seems, contemporary. I think they, residents or others or developers or whoever, I would hope are looking at those things. I just wonder if we shouldn't go a little bit further and be more clear that they once we have a area plan in place, that those are reference materials, but not be treated as adopted plans in the sense that we have to go through and make an amendment to the plan just to do something that everybody's on board doing. So I don't know if there's been discussion on that, or if you see a path forward where we might be able to just, let's not put ourselves in a bind where we've got some 25-year-old plan that we want to respect, so we leave it on the books, and then it just comes back and bites us.
Yeah, so one thing that I mentioned in the presentation here, that as staff starts to work on the area plan process, staff will consider and review the older sub-area plans if they should be considered for retirement. And so as the authorizing resolution is written for these area plans, that will be a consideration of whether or not the plan is still consistent with the current city policies, or it's very outdated and should be considered for retirement. So that will be kind of folded in the process as the area plan is kind of being authorized for through a resolution.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it'll probably make more sense once we're actually doing the first one or the second one. We'll kind of see how that's going. I would just encourage folks to be thinking about more across the board retirement. And if there are things that are in those plans that will be retired that are important enough that we wouldn't want to retire the plan, I think that should make its way into the new area plan or sub-area plan. So I think it would be much cleaner if once that happens, we don't kind of leave some floating relics of plans out there. And I think particularly on the transportation front, because a lot of the transportation related stuff from even 5 years ago, I think is probably not keeping pace with current understanding of what we're trying to do with our transportation network. So just really relevant, I think, for transportation to try and make sure we've got stuff very up to date. Thanks.
Okay, Alder Figueroa, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Rashi. I just want to, I heard you mention a couple of criteria on how to archive a plan or retire a plan. I don't know if you have like a full list or if that's still growing, but for my area in specific, the biggest relevance right here, the plans that I have are not only old, but they don't represent the people that we have in the area that plan is supposed to serve. So I would like to make sure that is part of the assessment. So anything that is over, the 10-year census mark or whatever, and that should just be kind of a big element to retire a plan. This district has, there's like at least 3 plans for the same area. They're so old, and the people that participated there are not the people that live here today. So thank you. And thank you for that. I really like these this mentality of having a broader areas that goes across districts, not just one, not one aldermanic districts, just broader. That's really way more efficient. Thank you.
All right, Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I'm excited to see this change. I think it will make a lot of things smoother. Speaking to my experience at Transportation Commission, we're often in a situation where we're looking at conflicting information or plans that are decades old and trying to interpret what those mean for decisions that we're making today. And I guess to the point that we've kind of been hearing about retiring old plans and things, I think I'm hoping this process will help sort of standardize the way these plans are written, with an eye for both, what old plans said, but also like what the city's goals are. And I'm thinking of some older plans that I think have a lot of language like, the residents have a strong preference for X or Y, which I think in a lot of ways sort of just codifies opposition to change that existed in the neighborhood at one point, and it makes it really hard to know, like, oh, okay, the area plan says people have a preference for this, but what does that mean to us? So I think sort of going through consistently and figuring out what a plan should sound like versus just sort of saying what was heard in some neighborhood meetings or something like that will be really valuable.
All right, Alder Foster, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, I had one other comment I just wanted to share here. I did share with planning staff, but one thing that really excites me about this is the opportunity for transportation department and traffic engineering and engineering staff to really, I think we've done a good job of, cross-agency work on all of our plans, but it's just really hard when there's, a new Oscar Mayer special area plan, and there's dedicated resources in the planning division to work on that, and we're getting neighborhood feedback, and then all the rest of the agencies just kind of have to get on board and do that. But I think having more of a plan of which ones we're going to do and having it be more standardized, I really think there'll be a really good opportunity for traffic engineering, Department of Transportation staff to really accept that roving geographic planning and really have those as be our opportunities to also then feed projects into our Safe Streets Madison program, our Vision Zero, right? Like, oh, we're also focused on this zone now, with planning staff, and really hopefully integrate so that we're not just creating a good document that might be used at some point, but that it's actually driving our projects, right? We do that work, we get agreements around it, and then those get slated in, and 2 to 3 years later, they're getting built out. So I think that's a really big opportunity for this as well.
Philip, did you want to reply to what Grant was saying?
Yeah. I was just going to mention that is something that we've had conversations with planning staff about, that it presents opportunities for us to talk about transportation and make sure that we're updating our plans with that and providing input in there. So we have been looped in, and we're certainly on board with that idea as well. We think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Philip. Alder Paulson, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
Because we're kind of far into this process, I'm not going to get into too much of the advantages, and I think that's probably all been beaten to death a year ago. I do want to comment on the consolidated North and Northeast, and I really don't like the consolidation. And the reason is that so much of that so much of that area is parts that aren't even in the city yet. There's so much that's going to happen and be planned out there. I think I think it's too big of an area, and I wish we had not consolidated that. So to the question earlier, what Alder districts are, some of those aren't in any Alder district. In fact, we're going to see the Reiner neighborhood plan that's coming up, which is a chunk of that, but there's all sorts of other chunks out there. So I wish we had left North and Northeast separate. Especially for at least the next 10 or 20 years until we have built more out, and then maybe it makes sense to relook at it. But right now, I think that's too big, too much is going to be happening in that, and we should leave them separate.
I'll just say that one of the reasons why they were also consolidated, because we also looked at the demographics of all these area plan geographies, and the far north and the far northeast had the lowest population because those areas are largely undeveloped. So that was another reasoning why they were also consolidated in one area.
Great. I still don't like it. So I'm sorry about that. But
okay. Any further questions for Pravashi? Comments? All right, we'll be looking for a motion. Alder Paulson?
Maybe this isn't, I don't know if it's even before us anymore. I guess I would like to recommend this, but using the earlier maps with the 13 planning districts.
So you'd make a motion to authorize with the previous maps, with the 13 sections instead of 12?
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Harrington McKinney. Further discussion, Alder Paulson, did you want to speak further to your motion?
No, I inadvertently did it in the question section, but.
All right, that's fine. Thank you. Alder Foster, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I don't think this is like particularly transportation related, and I don't know if we need to really hash that out right here. Alder Paulson's on the Plan Commission as well, which will be, ultimately giving the recommendation to council. So, I mean, I wouldn't support this amended version. I think we should have even fewer than the 12 personally, and we can kind of get into that debate here. I would maybe, if everyone's on board, if we could just recommend it as presented with the 12, leave it that coming from TPPB, and then, anybody that's interested can go to Plan Commission and share thoughts about the number of districts, unless other folks have particular opinions on that as it relates to transportation planning.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Alder Paulson, go ahead, please.
I would be happy, in the interest of moving things along tonight, to also simply recommend that we move forward, and we can debate it at Plan, or Alder Foster and I can fight it out because we sit relatively close to each other.
Okay, so you're going to pull your motion, and so then I will need a new motion. Alder Furman, go ahead, please.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Chris, second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of recommending approval of authorizing the Planning Division's shift to a planning framework with the higher 13 higher level area plans to be updated every 10 years. I think that should actually say 12. Anyway, as it was presented tonight, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Please list McKinney as abstaining.
Okay, opposed, no?
Please list McKinney as abstaining.
Yes, thank you, Alder Harrington McKinney. So,
thank you, Chair.
I hear all ayes and with one abstention. If anyone would like to register a no vote or any additional abstentions, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is Legistar 72616, Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan.
Again, good evening, everyone. Urvashi Martin, the Planning Division, here to give you all an update on the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. So what we're going to be covering in today's presentation here, give you a little bit of background about this planning area, share some of the draft plan recommendations, share what the project timeline is for this process, a little bit of context of the project timeline for this planning process. Staff had started working on this planning process back in 2019, but we had to pause this planning process for a couple of years for the Starkweather Creek watershed study that was being conducted in this area that covers a portion of the planning area. And as we have received some initial results from that study, staff is restarting this planning process, and here to give you all an update. And so we'll share what the next steps are and the timeline as we move forward, and then we'll be available for questions. So a little bit of background about the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. It's on the far northeast side of the city. So here's Highway 151, so east of 151, just north of the planning area is Sun Prairie. For the boundaries, we're looking at the town line between Town of Burke and Town of Sun Prairie, kind of forms the eastern boundaries of the planning area. Thorson Road forms the southern boundaries, and then Felon Road and the Wisconsin Southern Railroad tracks form the western and the northern boundaries of the planning area. Almost all of the lands within the planning area are currently within the Town of Burke, which is expected to attach to the City of Madison by 2036 under the cooperative plan that exists between City of Madison, City of Sun Prairie, Village of DeForest with the Town of Burke, which determines how Town of Burke will be incorporated by these municipalities when it's dissolved in 2036. Area-wise, the planning area is roughly 1,480 acres. There's some existing developments within the planning area. There's some residential developments in the town subdivisions, and there's also some industrial and commercial uses. And the planning area falls entirely within the Sun Prairie School District. What we'll be focusing on with this planning process, we'll be providing recommendations on future land uses and the types of housing and residential developments that can occur in this area. We'll also be providing recommendations on transportation and street layout that can encourage more connectivity, walkability, and bikeability, and extension of future transit to serve this area. We'll also be providing recommendations on future park spaces to serve future residents. Also identify potential stormwater management and drainage locations. The plan will also provide a phasing plan on how public utilities like water and sewer would be extended to serve this area. And then also sustainability. The plan will provide recommendations and strategies on how to advance sustainability as we plan for this new neighborhood. So this is our draft land use recommendations that we are proposing in the plan. For housing, we are recommending housing mix 1 through 4 as the types of housing. Just to generally describe a little bit what these housing types mean. Housing mix 1 is predominantly single-family housing with some mix of townhomes, 4 units, and duplexes. With this planning process, we have increased the density range for housing mix 1 from what is typically considered by our previous neighborhood development plans. Generally, the range has been 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre. With this planning process, we've increased it to 6 to 12 dwelling units per acre. Housing mix 2 is also single family, but it's slightly more intensive. Single family on smaller lots also includes a mix of townhomes, duplexes, 4 units, etc., with a range of 8 to 20 dwelling units per acre. Housing mix 3, which is the next type of housing, it's generally smaller multifamily buildings with a range of 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre. And then housing mix 4 is the most intensive type of housing we are recommending in the planning area, which consists of multifamily apartment buildings, could be up to 5 stories with a range of 40 to 70 dwelling units per acre. Also, for neighborhood mixed use, we're recommending 2 locations within the planning area at the intersection of Nelson and Reiner Road and the intersection of Future Lean and Thorson Road intersection. We are recommending employment use at the southeast quadrant of Nelson and Reiner Road and a portion west of Reiner Road. For park spaces, there are currently 3 existing parks within the planning area. In addition to that, we're recommending 3 new park spaces. And this light green outline area, which is just north of Nelson area, this larger open space area, we're recommending that for future regional, natural, and recreation area. This area has several natural features, and the Dane County Parks and Open Space Plan has recommended this area as part of the Koshkonong Creek Natural Resource Area Corridor to preserve some of those natural resources. In addition to that, the cooperative plan recommends this area as an open space between City of Madison and City of Sun Prairie. So we're recommending this as a regional recreational area with some potential recreational opportunities for trails, hiking, mountain biking, shoreline fishing, etc. In addition to that, what we're showing on the map is these lighter green shades, which are areas shown for stormwater management required for future developments, and also other open space, so areas that have environmental features that create constraints for development fall within that land use category. So these are our draft transportation recommendations for street network. Reiner Road is the north-south arterial street that runs through the planning area and then continues further north in Sun Prairie. Future Lean Road, which was recommended as an arterial street in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan, which is this planning area just south of the Reiner planning area. We are recommending extending that through the planning area and then continuing it further east. Nelson Road functions as an arterial street until Reiner and then extends as a collector street further east. Burke Road is the existing east-west collector street through the planning area. And then Thorson Road exists as a collector street in the planning area up till Burke Road. In this plan, we are recommending extending that further north and continuing till Nelson Road. In addition to the arterial and collector street, we are recommending a detailed local street network that can really encourage connectivity in the planning area. Also in this plan, we are providing detailed recommendations on future street cross sections for arterial and collector streets. And we have some detailed sketches included in the plan document that illustrate what these street cross sections should look like. For Reiner Road, Future Lean Road, and Nelson Road, which are the higher traffic volume streets within the planning area, we are recommending a shared use path for these streets. Burke Road and Thorson Road, which are the collector streets within the planning area, we're recommending a buffered bike lane for those streets. In addition to that, there's certain segments of Reiner Road and Future Lean Road and Burke Road that are adjacent to areas that we're recommending for high-density housing and mixed-use developments. We're recommending on-street parking be considered for those segments of the streets that are adjacent to these land uses. For a bike and shared use path network, as I mentioned in the previous slide, for Reiner Road, Nelson Road, and Future Lean Road, we are showing shared use paths for those streets, and we have illustrated that in this map. In addition to that, we are recommending 5 off-street shared use paths networks in the planning area. A couple of the shared use paths that were recommended in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan, which is just south of the planning area, we are recommending extending that. So the town center path, we're recommending extending that through the planning area, and then recommending a railroad crossing to connect that path to the neighborhoods to the west. There's a north-south pipeline that runs through kind of the middle of the planning area, which is shown in this black line on the map. The Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan had recommended a path, the North Pipeline path, to run parallel to that pipeline. We are recommending extending that through the planning area and then connecting it to the Reiner Road shared use path, and then continuing further north to connect with the regional trail network. We're also recommending this east-west greenway path that kind of runs through the middle of the planning area through some of the greenways that the plan is recommending. And then there's this east-west path, which kind of forms the southern boundaries of the planning area. This path was recommended in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan. We're continuing that recommendation from the plan. And then we're recommending this railroad path to run parallel to the railroad tracks, and then recommending a railroad crossing to connect that path to the shared use path network, which is in the neighborhoods to the north of the planning area in Sun Prairie. For future transit, right now, existing transit is north of the planning area. So Metro Route 23 serves the Sun Prairie Park and Ride, which is just north of the planning area during peak hours. Future bus rapid transit is also expected to serve the Sun Prairie Park and Ride lot. We are recommending future transit on Reiner Road. And as these areas start to see more development and ridership potential increases, transit be extended on Nelson, Burke, and Future Lean Road. Some of our draft sustainability recommendations. So just to highlight some of the transportation related recommendation, in general with the land use and transportation recommendations, we're trying to encourage more compact growth in the peripheral areas and incorporate complete green street principles. So more trips could be made by walking, biking, or by transit, and less reliance on automobile trips. We also have recommendations in the plan to improve stormwater management and infiltration through the use of features like rain gardens, porous pavements, integrating vegetation by having terrace plantings, providing enough width in the right of way for terrace planting and street trees, and also making sure that new developments that are planned, they're electric vehicle ready. So for the timeline for this planning process, we recently provided an update to the Plan Commission at the June 27th meeting. We are here before you tonight to give you all an update on this planning process. Staff will then work on completing the full draft of the plan text and maps in the months of July and August, and then hoping to introduce the draft plan document to the council at the September meeting and go through the various boards, commission, committee review process in the month of September. If all the committees are covered in the month of September, go to the Common Council for their consideration of adoption in their October meeting. So that concludes my presentation. These are 5 questions that staff is seeking feedback from the members of the board, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Wrong button. All right, thank you. Questions? Ravashi, did you want to put that last slide up again, please? Alder Foster,
Yes.
Go ahead while she's working on that.
Thank you. Yeah, the slide that showed the proposed shared use paths, the one on the south, was that Burke Road, or what was the one that showed buffer, not a path, the blue line?
The Burke Road is showing the buffered bike lane on street facility.
And is that from the grid? Is that also the one that showed yes to parking, or there was a couple buffered bike lanes on there? And I think only one of them said yes for on-street parking.
Yeah, so for Burke Road, this section of Burke Road where we're showing high-density housing, we're recommending on-street parking be considered for that segment.
Okay. And has any of this been developed already? Like, what part of this is just future imagination, and what part is already set, particularly in terms of like street construction?
These are all right now rural cross sections. So these cross sections that are recommended are for future upgrades when development starts to occur, and these are upgraded to urban cross sections.
So I guess I'm really happy to see. I think this is really good to see the recommendations generally for shared use paths on the arterials and the busy collectors. That's what I think guidance would tell us. I mean, separated bike facilities, whether they're shared use paths or one way. But I guess I'm wondering why we wouldn't do that then also for Burke Road. Why would we plan on buffered bike lanes, and in particular with on-street car parking? It's really not ideal at all, and it's not really low stress. And so I would think it would kind of put that out of reach for folks. So if this is all for sort of new, unless something's been said already, why wouldn't that be green?
Yeah, so that's a good feedback. That's the type of feedback we're looking for. I mean, we have the cross sections we have recommended is generally the guidance we've got from our transportation staff. So that was the guidance we received for Burke and Thorson Road to show those as buffered bike lane. But yeah, that's a great feedback. We can definitely take that back. Okay.
I don't know who you worked with. Is anybody on from that could speak to why that was even recommended, or maybe they're not on the meeting tonight?
They are not on the meeting. We talked to our traffic engineers and engineering staff, Chris Pedikowski, on this.
Okay. Well, maybe maybe if somebody could just reach out and I could ask a few more questions. I don't need to slow it down too much here, but in general, I like to see that we're showing more separated bike facilities as what we're looking for, and I think in general we should be showing that for any higher volume roadways. And then my only other question is just around the sort of overall densities. So from a transportation perspective, low density single family detached is a real loser, and it's really impossible for us to provide high quality transportation services with that building form. I think you mentioned that these recommendations, the sort of the ranges are moving up a little bit. So housing mix 1 is moving up a little bit, maybe the others as well. Has there been any discussion, or I guess my feedback would be higher density is better for transportation policy. So is there any reasons why we would want to allow or encourage or require what looks like still a fair amount of the actual land being in the housing mix 1 or 2? Yeah, I think if we're trying to serve people with transit and walking and biking, even though these are out sort of on the fringes, it's really not helping us to build low density communities because they're really tough to serve with transportation.
Yeah, so we really tried to increase with this planning process, try to increase that density range. Certain areas that we are showing for housing mix 1 are the areas in the township where there's already existing low density developments. And also another caveat with the cooperative plan that is in place, there are certain protected areas within the town that would remain within the town until 2036 when the town is dissolved and comes into the city of Madison. So some of those areas which fall within those protected areas were also areas we kind of showed them as housing mix 1. For the other areas, we mostly have tried to show housing mix 2, which is slightly more intensive than housing mix 1. One of the challenges with that we ran into with trying to show more density is areas that are kind of closer to environmental features, and there's several in this area that have wetlands and other environmental features that make it harder to have show higher density, and that kind of limited us a little bit also in showing more density.
Could you just that last point explain a little bit? Is it a stormwater issue, or what's the issue with not being able to have higher density adjacent to wetlands? Or
yeah, it's a stormwater issue that there are several areas, like you can see around Burke Road, like some of the prominent intersections where we could have shown more density, have is where kind of the water is draining.
where it's green, you wouldn't just paint the intersection green. I get it.
Yes.
But where it is going, sort of housing mix 2, for example, are there barriers to that not being 3 in more areas?
Yeah, I mean, we have tried to show wherever appropriate, but if there are any other areas that you can think of and let staff know, we're definitely open to feedback.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
All right, Alder Paulson, you're up next. Go ahead, please.
This is just kind of a follow-up or just an observation to what Alder Foster was talking about. On Burke Road, I don't know if folks know the topography out here, in particular that segment of Burke Road and that kind of on the border where it hits the railroad. That's the border there. That housing mix 4. That's a pretty steep drop. It's this weird valley. You go down, hit the railroad, and you kind of come right back up on Burke there, and it's this weird 3-way stop with a railroad, and you're just kind of thankful that no one drives out there because Lord only knows what's going to happen if someone else was coming from the other direction. So I don't know if that factors into anything that traffic engineering was thinking about for what do they do in that street. But it is you're coming down a hill and you're immediately going back up a hill on Burke Road there.
All right, thanks, Alder Paulson. Are there any additional questions or comments on the presentation? All right, so folks have had a chance to see this. If something comes up, or if you have ideas or proposals, make sure you let staff know. Urvashi, did you get kind of what you were looking for from us?
Yeah, generally, if there are any comments regarding the on-street parking question, one thing that staff was really interested to know from the members of the board if on-street parking is something that we should be showing, because that's a feedback that we had or question that we had received from the Plan Commission, that if we should be showing on-street parking on certain segments of Reiner, Future Lean, and Burke, where we are showing higher density and mixed use development. So that's would be really helpful feedback for staff.
Alder Foster, go ahead, please.
Well, I'm mostly stalling to give Chris some time to think on his answer. And I would like a little bit more to know kind of how we're imagining the area to function. I think there are some advantages to on-street parking in where it's going to be used, and if there's like a lot of activity and stuff going on, I can get behind it. But it does it really requires a lot more space, and probably more than what we usually think of. You can't just add another 8 foot for the car, because you really need to create a whole nother buffer for the bike lane. So that was part of what raised my eyebrow about the buffered bike lane with on-street parking. And I guess if we are going to go that route, I would like to make sure engineering and TE staff are looking at the cross sections, and we should be planning for an 8 foot parking lane, a 3 foot buffer door zone, a bike lane, and then another buffer to the travel lane. Because otherwise, it's really not going to be a good facility. So, depending on the situation, I could be on board with having it there, but let's not compromise the bike network because of it. And Chris has his hands up.
Go ahead, Chris.
I apparently have some thoughts on parking. No, I think I was thinking about this a little bit. I think generally, it would be good to see the on-street parking, especially in those denser areas that are more mixed use. But when we get into the residential only areas, they end up, we've seen this in other places, they end up creating overly wide streets where the parking isn't really used, and it just creates speeding problems and stuff. So that's a short answer, but I think to Alder Foster's earlier point, I think just getting densities up to as much as we can is going to justify the on-street parking and make it all the more likely that we can actually run transit here in an affordable way, which we just recently saw going through the network redesign, that it's really challenging to justify running transit everywhere. So I think, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Alder Hinton McKinney, you're up next. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. For the novice on the committee, the question is whether it should be represented. And so my time on transportation is that's always a controversial discussion, too much, too little, not at all. And as we are early in the planning process, to have it eliminated and then going back and add it, especially in those high density areas, it's kind of early to tell. But my question is it wise to eliminate it and not have it represented, and then going back and having to add it back in? So I am not going to get into a match of discussion between the Alder Foster and Chris, because they are the experts. They've been looking at this type of topography much longer than I have. But that's just an initial question that I have, is that if it's eliminated, how would we go back and say incorporate it on a smaller scale? So that's the thing that's missing for me, because that's just my comment.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion? Alder Foster.
I would move approval with a general encouragement towards higher densities.
Thank you, Alder. Is there a second, Randy? It's like a second discussion. Alder Foster, did you want to speak any further? Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of recommending adoption of the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan with an emphasis on, I'm sorry, Alder Furman, go ahead, please.
I thought this was just a feedback session, that we weren't actually approving this.
Oh, okay.
Can we just clarify that with staff?
It could have been my mistake.
Yes, this was just an update discussion item.
Okay, Alder Foster, did you want to pull your motion? Sorry.
Yeah, that's almost better anyways. I was hoping to do some of that other follow-up, so thank you, Alder Furman, for catching that.
Yeah, thank you, Alder Furman. That was my mistake. All right, seeing that there is no more question or discussion, we'll move on to our last item for the evening, Legislator 72645, supporting approving the City of Madison's application to the U.S. Department of Transportation by the Vision Zero team for a Safe Streets and Roads for All implementation grant, the acceptance of the grant, and authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute a grant agreement with USDOT or its designee if awarded the grant.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So this is a resolution that we're going to introduce at the council tomorrow. And then we'll go to Finance Committee and also go to Transportation Commission before it's back to Common Council. So we are working on a very tight timeline, like all the grant applications, but especially for this one due to the size of the program. But we do want to, bring it here tonight to the board, for your information and for your input. So this is another informational item. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Congress made available a significant amount of funds for roadway safety. So this is a new program called the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, and it supports primarily the implementation of activities that are included in an approved Vision Zero action plan or a similar safety plan. There is a small amount of money available for planning as well, but the bulk of money is in implementation. So for this cycle, this year, there is $1 billion available in total. We feel like we are in a great position to pursue this grant. As you know, our Vision Zero work has been regularized by US DOT, and you are being featured by like in the League of Cities, and we'll be speaking at the upcoming NACTO conference in Boston. And as people know that we are serious and we're doing good work here in Madison, so that's a good thing. And also thanks to all of you, we recently completed the only Vision Zero action plan in Wisconsin. So we definitely have a lot of advantage on that. I think other communities will try to catch up, trying to pursue this grant in future years. But we are in a really good position this year. So that's why we are pretty aggressive in the amount. We are looking at a $20 million application. And so there is a 20% local match, so the federal funds will cover 80% of the cost. And we already included the 20% local match in the traffic engineering's budget request for 2023. We really felt like this, if we got this grant, it help us to accelerate the implementation of our Vision Zero action plan. Kind of really make a difference in our community. So a candidate project list is not required by the grant, but it's very desirable to actually to have a well thought out candidate project list, to attach to the application and to help describe the safety improvements that we intend to do with the grant. We feel like it will go a long way with US DOT and will help maximize our chance of being awarded a grant. So the team is working hard on that. Again, the deadline for us to finish everything application is September 15th. We still have a lot of work to do, but we we feel like we'll be in good position. So the candidate list we're developing, it's probably not the final list. I do think given the scope of the project, complexity of the project, if we get grants, we can probably work with US DOT to make some adjustments if needed. We are right now, because of the short timeline, we are using the Vision Zero Action Plan that we recently adopted as a guideline to develop the candidate list. We are also, we're really trying to, emphasize the hybrid network and also equity and using data. We are also using, the process developed by this board and Transportation Commission for the Safe Streets Madison program. So trying to use that to come up with very thought out candidate list. By the way, we didn't copy USDT for the name when we come up with the Safe Streets Madison name, the program name. Actually, I think they copied us on that. So that's good to see. So I will stop there, and I'll ask Renee to talk a little bit about more, give you a little more details on, what you are considering on the candidate project list, and also that give you a flavor of what the projects may look like. And when we're done, we're going to attach that to the Vision Reaction Plan as appendix. Renee.
Sure. So I think the thing with this grant is it does require you to have an action plan. And so this is an opportunity for all the things that were in the approved plan, particularly things that were listed as within 5 years, but did not necessarily have funding to advance some of those things. So if you go back and look at that approved plan, it's on the website. Some of those things would be in there. I think the process that we're in now is really to show project readiness and support for this application, that if we are awarded it, that we're going to be able to do it, and that the council supports it. There's the funding to do it. Luckily, we have our own Safe Streets Madison program, which has a big focus on safety already and has a metric for doing that. So I think this is an opportunity for some of the projects on that list that scored very well, but were larger scale projects for the city, but would be considered smaller to moderate sized projects at the federal level, to move those forward, and to really do some of the projects that have more extensive pedestrian safety, more extensive bike safety, more of those separated facilities that can be hard to get done on a quick timeline to get those done. So we're really trying to look at, what locations are on the high injury network. They, score well in that safety category in our Safe Streets Madison. They have a ped gap or a bike gap, like what kind of rises to the top. And then looking at equity, that is a huge focus. And they mean racial equity, particularly. That's a big focus at the federal level, as well as looking at low income demographics, as well as our non-drivers. They do want to look at it also in the broadly projects that support access for people with disabilities, for youth. So those types of projects. And they do talk a lot about, sort of, being smaller size, but of course, small at the federal level is not just a single RFP like it might be at the city level. So I think it will provide an opportunity to do more transformative projects. Think, a lot of the things that we talked about here with protected bike lanes, protected intersections, filling gaps in the pedestrian network, that really have that high impact safety. So looking, say, at the comp plan, Imagine Madison, it has some, sort of tier 1 bike gaps, or pedestrian gaps, like which ones are on the high injury network, trying to do that evaluation, looking at the level of stress for bike connectivity and what we can do there, and really seeing what rises to the top to build out that list beyond what we have on Safe Streets in Madison now, but trying to take a lot of that high injury data. And because this is a data-driven project, and figure out like what could be the best projects to make the biggest difference, because obviously this is year one of the project and they need to also award things that are going to have good impact and will support them receiving this funding into the future and keeping this program going and funded at a high level. So really we're just trying to find that mix of projects that meets with their criteria and are in our action plan, and get that all done by September 15th so that we can be successful. I think this first year we have the highest likelihood because the implementation grants won't be as competitive. There aren't as many people with action plans yet. Yeah, I think really we're just trying to take that Safe Streets Madison program to the next level and use it to develop out this larger list that we can use to apply for this project, for this funds, and then into the future for future opportunities.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Alder Figueroa, go ahead, please.
I really need to ask this, and I forgot. Are these matching funds?
Yes, there is a 20% local match, and so that's $4 million. So already included the local match in our in traffic engineering's budget request for 2023. So hopefully it will end up in the executive budget, and hopefully our council will support that.
Yeah, thank you. I skimmed through the resolution. I didn't. My bad. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, we're trying to plan ahead so that we really show US DOT that we're committed, we're ready. Hopefully it give us some advantages on that.
Great, thank you. Alder Paulson, go ahead, please.
So I've got a couple budget questions. So the plan for 2023 looked like there was about $2 million in Safe Streets Madison for 2023. Does that $2 million get kind of included in our match already? So it's not another $4 million in match. It's another $2 million into our budget to get us to $4 million, or is this sort of brand new funds?
That is a wonderful question. So thank you for asking that, Alder Paulson. Yeah. So they actually separate. So, this is a brand new program, right? And there is no guarantee that we're going to get it. In order to, we still have some money to accommodate the needs of the community. As you know that, for example, this year, we received over 300 requests for improvements, through Safe Streets and Madison. So there is overriding needs out there. So we do want to maintain some level of funding. So we can continue to do this, even if we don't get the grant. So that $20 million is separate, and those will be through city funds, and these $4 million will be separate. So we actually instead of combining those into one program, in our budget request, we intentionally separate out to two programs, with understanding that one is specifically city funded initiative, another one is a federal grant program. Again, it happens to be called the same name, so it's a little bit confusing. And but hopefully we got both.
Sure, right. So, is the project list going to basically be off those 300? Is that kind of what we're submitting? Because there's a project in my neighborhood I'd love to see get funded. It's number 278 on the list. I don't know, the Alder in 2040 might be able to see that get done. But so I'm excited about this one because it's going to get through. But it's also the project is some speed bumps, which it would be very helpful for this particular neighborhood. There is speeding. It is a mess of a road. But I'm just curious, is this just going to be sort of like we're going to get a bunch of money from the feds? We got our 300 projects. We're going to burn through those and that's the money. Or are we going to go out and find like new things that we're so crazy and off the wall, like we didn't even bother doing it? Like, major improvements on Milwaukee Street or major improvements on East Wash or something where, right, if we dropped in $5 million, that we could really make a difference that we didn't even consider before.
Yeah, another great question. I'll ask Renee to answer that. But I want to point out that we want to make our project list as competitive as possible, right? So I think some of those will be included in the list, some of may not. Renee.
Yeah, sure. I would say definitely there will be some new things as we're sort of analyzing the data and that are not currently on the Safe Streets Madison. And some of those are because they're just, they're just outside the scope of a program like Safe Streets Madison, which is, more smaller improvements. However, I think the idea is that this is going to put a good dent also in that Safe Streets Madison list and let some of those things that are further down, they're going to move up to the top faster. So it wouldn't be 2040, right? Because we're really just accelerating the improvements. And some of these really highest need ones, which are all we can do right now, are going to be able to be taken out of that federal money. And then some of those other things that maybe don't fit quite as well within this current parameter are going to get funded sooner because they're not competing against things that, are scoring a 10 on safety and they're only scoring, 1 or 2 points, but still have an important value to the community. So I think some will come off that list and then it'll just rise everything up to the top.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alder Foster, you're up next. Go ahead.
Thanks. I reviewed the agenda, and I'm pretty sure this is getting introduced tomorrow, so we don't formally need a recommendation from this body, but appreciate it coming here. And really, I'm really grateful that we did the work we did around Safe Streets Madison and Vision Zero both. And it's just awesome that we're so prepared for this. And I really appreciate staff's being on the ball on this and really prioritizing it, because this is big. It really has huge potential. So I really appreciate you all prioritizing that. And I think it's good. It's a good reminder that we should really continue to focus to put as much as we can, anything we can find, anything we know about, start getting it logged in there. Because there's this, but I think we've seen the same thing with some of the state grants as well, right? Like, the more we can document where we've got opportunities and what we would do with the money if we had it, the more likely we'll get these improvements made. So just really appreciate all of the work so far, and very supportive of this application, and fingers crossed.
All right. Any further questions or comments? So as Alder Foster said, I don't believe we need a formal motion on this at this time. It'll be introduced tomorrow. It'll be coming back here again. As long
Sure.
as
Just to clarify, I think because of the timeline, I think it'll be going to Transportation Commission for formal review. But this is sort of our opportunity, I think.
And then the members then can join TC if they wish for that. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Last call for comments, questions. Seeing none, that's all we have for the evening. Thank you all for accommodating the longer meet time. We've had a little bit of a break here, so need to catch up. Motions to adjourn. Chris.
Yeah, move adjournment.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Alder Furman, thank you. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting for the evening, please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. We're adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.